Everyone, how are you? Good morning, good morning. Happy Tuesday today. We are doing our second session today with a program operator, Leisure Time Tours, to kind of get into session two, which is the guest experience. We're doing some inside scoop, inside baseball into what life actually looks like at a Pesach program. Feel free to ask questions and comments in the chat over here. We're gonna get into all the nuts and bolts and the details today. So feel free to ask questions and comments, and we're gonna have a lot of fun here. We're gonna talk about the Seder experience. We'll talk about the food quality and the standards of kashrut. We'll talk about programming, entertainment. We'll talk about shul and davening setup, and then we'll also end with managing guests' expectations. So we're just waiting for him to jump in, and then we can begin. And if you have any other questions, like any topics that you guys want to learn about or hear about, feel free to put those into the chat as well. Hold on a second. All right, we're just waiting to get started here, and then we'll jump in here. There we go. All right. How you doing?
I am good.
Okay.
Just
We got
breaking news.
Robert Frusher here, Chaim Frusher, also known as Chaim Frusher from Leisure Time Tours, where you're in New Jersey today, right?
Right, but guess what? The event is taking place tomorrow, not today.
Lovely.
And I drove an hour and 45 minutes this morning to get to the Bell Center. And then when I realized that it was tomorrow, which my person wasn't so clear on, that told me to come, um, I said I can't even leave here because I got your interview coming up at 11:30. So I decided to sit into it. I'm in a manicure pedicure place right now, getting my nails done while we're being interviewed. Donnie, is that okay, or
Wow.
is that
That's fine, as
like
long as long as
against?
long as you show your nails after the call, so we can see if they did a good job. That's fine. All right, and by the way, the event you're talking about, for those who are just tuning in, is JetCon. It's the Jewish travel event, that where a lot of travel agents go and hotel kosher hotels and things like that. So JetCon, I think, is this week. Is I guess tomorrow. All right. So we're going to spend the next 20, 30 minutes talking about the guest experience. This is session two. Session one was a hit. It was great for those tuning in. Last week, we talked about understanding the market, how PESA programs work, who attends. And so we had a great conversation there, a lot of great feedback from people asking great questions after the chat. And now, if you guys are tuning in now, feel free to drop any questions or comments as we're going through it. But we're going to talk about the guest experience. So this is a little bit more, what does life actually look like while you're on a program? So Robert, let's dive in. I think the first question I had here is about the Seder experience, right? Tell me about the difference between, when you go away on these programs, there's communal Seders, there's private Seders, there's family-run Seders, there's rabbi-led Seders, there's interactive Seders. There's a lot of different type of Seder experiences. And if you can tell me a little bit about, what are the different types of Seder experiences, let's hone in there, and maybe what are the benefits and the non-benefits of each type of Seder for people to get a sense of, that would be great.
Okay, so let's first do the what we call the communal seder. So the communal seder, which from at least my hotels um, is the smallest seder, and those are people that want to be led by the rabbi or our chaz. I mean, it's always but it's either just the rabbi that's doing it or it's the rabbi and the chazan, depending on the hotel. And that's for the people that don't feel comfortable about doing their own seder at their own table, and they want to be led by somebody
Why is
that's
that?
doing it.
Why do people not? Is it because do you feel they want the experience with a communal seder? Do they want it to run faster? What has been kind of the feedback from some of your guests?
Okay, so twofold. The people that would go to a communal seder, a lot of times, those are the two by twos. So let's say it's just a husband and a wife,
Mm,
and they don't want to sit at their own table doing their own seder. They want to be with other people. That's number one. Probably the second option is going to be for people that just don't feel comfortable in terms of running their own. They rather have somebody explaining it to them instead of just opening up Haggadah and
mm,
reading quickly through. So they rather have a little bit of explanation. Um, our communal seders, they're basically quick, and they're the highlights of the explanations. It's not obviously a lecture or speech. These are just we're about to say the Manishtana. It represents da 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 da. It just gives people a little bit of an explanation about what's going on. And yeah, so depending on our hotel, well, first of all, a lot of our I mean, some of our like PGA, for instance, we don't even have a communal seder because we don't have enough people that would want it, that want that option. So our other
mm,
hotels do have a communal seder, and we'll have anywhere between 50 people there, 50 to 100 people, depending on
hmm.
the property.
Okay.
And people enjoy it very much. You have some people even that they try to do it, the first night on their own, and then they want to have a little bit, you know, explanation more, so they'll join for the second night, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But you're typically not getting, your large family that's going to be in the communal seder, because those families obviously they either have, children and all different types of people, so they rather just do it on their own. So
And
that's
and our communal seders typically run by one person. I've seen communal seders at various programs where there was a dedicated leader, right? Where the program hired a leader for the Seder, which was pretty cool
right.
actually. It was like an interactive Seder where he asked questions, he gave like prizes to the kids.
Yeah.
But then I
We
also
try
see
to.
communal Seders where, it was just more of the, families coming together and leading it together, right?
Okay, so um, in ours, um, it's either being, like I said, it's either being led by one of our rabbis.
Hmm.
In all of our programs, we basically have two lead rabbis. So one will do the first night, one will do the second night. And whether or not we have a chazan at one of our properties, then that person will join. But it's not like a whole. Um, Most of the people don't want it, schlepped out, so long. So we try to keep it concise and moving along. And yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
like I said, we don't get like the large families, 10 people, even eights. Those people aren't typically joining a communal seder. They're doing it on their own.
Hmm.
Um, so that's pretty much the communal seder
Hmm.
in a
Ah,
nutshell. As far as the everybody else, the two other options are going to be if you wanna book a private room,
so those are the
and
private Seders.
those are private, and that will depend. I mean, each hotel we have different amounts of private seders that we can
Hmm.
accommodate. We typically
And those cost more. Typically,
yes,
right? So
yes,
typically
yes,
in the
yes.
industry,
Those are
you're spending an extra, anywhere from a couple
whether
hundred to a couple $1,000s more
yes,
for a private Seder. And private Seder, we're saying full private, right? So it's a
full
separate
private.
full private
Yeah,
because
you're in a meeting. You're in a meeting room,
you're in a meeting room, right? And
right?
there's semi-private, which I think you were getting to
Correct.
as
So
well. Yeah.
right. So first of all, Don, you mentioned a couple of hundred. So no one's. couple of hundreds don't exist anymore. You're going back to the 70s and
The
80s
couple
midnight.
hundreds do exist in European programs,
Oh,
by the way.
okay,
Okay, so
okay.
not to,
Oh,
you know,
Donnie, those are the programs that charge $4,000 a couple. They're doing a couple $100 savers.
those are the programs that charge anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 per couple. Right?
Okay,
They charge an extra couple $100
got it.
for a
Private.
private seder. Yeah,
Okay, so our private seders are more, well, first of all, we do privates, which I'm going to say is roughly, in the $1,500 price range a night. And then we have semis, which you're going to be in basically a smaller area, where you're going to have, two, three, or four families doing their own private seders in
yeah.
that area,
So,
and that sometimes is separated with pipe and drape, or
yeah,
depending what the area is, it will, whether or not there's a separation altogether. But
yeah.
then there are some people that, they're nervous to be in the regular ballroom, um,
Why is
where
that?
they're just, whether or not they've had a bad experience at a hotel, that it was very, very noisy or something.
I think that was
And
the To me, that's what I've heard. The feedback I've heard, always heard on why people book private or semi-private is because of the noise level, right?
right,
You want to be able to hear each other when you're kind of
right,
asking questions and you're going
for
through the
sure,
Seder. So it's nicer, yeah. Hmm.
yeah. So look, in our hotels, just so you understand, our ballrooms are typically half full for the
Yeah.
seders, because your communal seder people leave, your private
Yeah.
seder people leave, your semi-private seder people leave. So that
Yeah.
roughly leaves, half.
Yeah.
They're half full, so it's not crazy. And
Yeah.
also, some of our hotels, such as the hotel that you were at, Hilton Phoenix Tapatio, we also have people sitting outdoors, for the
Right. I mean, if you
whole
have the
all their
weather,
meals. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, the weather's
100%.
amazing there, and we have beautiful covered tents, just the ceilings, and so those people, if you're only half full and you're outdoors also, and you don't want to spend the extra money, it's definitely a very good option. But
Yeah.
it's rare in our hotels that we're able to have outdoor seating and indoor seating. It's depending on if the property can accommodate it.
Yeah.
So
So
at
let's
PGA we don't have that. We only have indoor.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. So, the end of what I love about the Seder experience is really also seeing other people's customs as well, right? You tend to see,
yeah,
people dress up. There's the people hitting with the leaves, right? People are
right.
standing on chairs. It's great to see so many different customs come together in one room.
Yeah,
All
as
right.
they say, it's very Labor Day.
It is very Labor Day. So let's move on to the next topic within this guest experience. So let's talk about food quality and kashrut standards. What
Okay.
I'd like to discuss in this one, maybe you can shed some light, not just on your programs, because you know this industry, for again, you've been around the longest here, right? 40 plus years in the Pesach program industry. So when you speak about this, more holistically around, glatt versus chalav Yisrael, gebrachs versus non-gebrachs,
Sure.
the mashgiach presence, special
Sure.
diets. Get into a little bit about that for people kind of looking for specific kashrut standards. Obviously, starting off, if you're looking at a program, you're trying to find the program, what's the best way to find out, right? About the kashrut standards and the food quality.
Okay.
How would you ask
So
those questions?
okay. So let's talk about kosher standards. So you mentioned the word galad. So I don't know of any hotel that is running a Pesach program that their meat is not glad. That's
Mhm.
just glad is an industry standard. It's almost saying like kosher, well, not kosher, but you
Yeah,
know what
yeah,
I'm saying. There is no,
yeah.
not non. There is no non-glad
Right. Yeah,
Pesach program.
you can get more, with Chalav Yisrael, base Yos. I mean, there's a bunch of, again,
Well, Chol
specifics in there.
Yisrael, Chol
Yeah,
Yisrael is
yeah,
obviously dairy. It has nothing to
yeah,
do
yeah,
with
yeah,
glad.
yeah,
So
100%.
Chol Yisrael, yes, I'm going to tell you. in today's market, also most hotels are going to be also Chol Yisrael. There are some that are not, but it's also almost become a standard that is Chol Yisrael. I mean, we used to, back in the day, we used to have programs that were not Chol Yisrael, because Pesach time. Let's understand something. Pesach, any milk that we're buying is anyway under, kosher to Passover supervision. So, the Chol Yisrael thing, is a little, it's whatever. I mean, I don't want to get too technical, but yeah, most programs are Chol Yisrael. And as far as kosher standards, okay, so the large kosher organizations such as OU, KUFK, they don't give Pesach programs supervision. They're not in the what you would call the temporary business. They're giving, once they put their label on something, it's 52 weeks a year. Obviously, if Pesach hotel's only operating, whatever, 2 weeks a year. So there's the large kosher organizations don't do that. So as far as you could even have caterers that are under all year round, the OU or Star K, and for Pesach, they go under a separate supervision just for Pesach because, like I said, those organizations do not want to get involved
Why
in.
not? Why don't they want to get involved?
Okay, so
These
for
are
instance,
these are the largest organizations. I mean, you've
yeah,
been around for 40 plus years. I would
yeah.
think that the OU will come to Robert Frusher and say, "Yeah, I'll do the supervision for your program. Why not?"
Well, Donnie, when we have some time, I'll tell you of our OU experience.
Okay.
Um, and that was actually my father was when the first non-kosher hotel was made kosher for Pesach, which was in 1972. We were under the OU,
Mm,
but temporarily we were under the OU. But
yeah.
it's too long of a story for me to get involved. But
Okay.
these organizations, um, because you're talking about a hotel operation where um, it's meat, dairy, pareve, where you're dealing with everything, simultaneously. That's not something these organizations do. They're
Hmm.
they're mainly giving supervision on product. Okay,
Hmm.
product is a very, very clean, simple um, situation.
Hmm.
They go to a factory and they're making chips, and boom, they're under a national supervision. Um, when you're talking about um, again meat, dairy, pareve operations, and you're talking about Pesach now, so it's it's just it's something that they're not interested in getting involved in.
Right.
It's too many moving pieces, and they just don't want they don't need the
Yeah.
headache, and
So
they treat it as
yeah.
a headache.
So here's a question for you, right? There's a lot of mashgiachs out there, and supervision out there
Hmm.
today in the Pesach program industry. You
Hmm.
got, Rabbi Beryl Simser, who's been, a long time supervisor, and he's been around to many different programs. He supervises, a lot of different programs, in fact. But there's a lot of people out there that you don't know. You go and you're
Right.
like, who is this rabbi? Who's that rabbi?
Yeah.
From a guest perspective, Robert, how do you know, right? And what should you do to identify if this rabbi, right, is a
Right.
good, is a good hashgacha, is a
Right.
good, has a good supervision or not? What would be
Right.
some key
So
advice for
obviously,
some people?
people can ask around certainly, but in general, when you're talking about a Pesach hashkafa in today's marketplace, you're talking about it's private, and that's going to be a specific rabbi. Now, is this rabbi involved in Kashrus 52 weeks a year? Is he not? All those questions can come into play. But, it goes back to our first conversation, Donnie, where, if you're going on a program that
Hmm.
is, promoting um, well-stock-based medrash, um, separate swimming, Pirkei and Beno style day camps. Okay, that is going to be a yeshivish type of program. And while I don't know every rabbi in that world in terms of supervision, but I'm assuming there that's the supervision that they're going to get. They're going to
Yeah.
get somebody in that world. Um,
Yeah. So let's do this. We got 15 minutes here. I want to make sure we touch upon everything, but food is really one of the major reasons why people go away for Pesach. They don't want to cook.
yes.
They want to enjoy their food. They want to make sure they have plenty of food. They want to make sure they have really good quality food. So when it
Right.
comes to good quality of food, Robert, what are some things to look out for? I always ask, the program operators when I look at to go away on programs, what types of foods you are going to have, what type of meats, right? But what are some pertinent questions that you think guests should ask when they inquire about going away on a Passover program to understand that the quality and the variety
Hmm.
of the food is enough and is going to
Right.
be great for their family. What are some good questions? You're on. I can't hear you. You're on mute.
You have
There we go.
um, look, again, I hate the terminology of you get what you pay for, but if you're going on a budget program, okay, you know right away, they're not serving rack of veal, they're not serving
Oh,
duck, they're not serving cowboy steaks. It's a budget program for a reason. So, I'm not saying the food is going to be bad, but you're not
you're not getting the
getting
variety.
you're not getting the variety, and you're not getting, the high end expensive stuff.
Hmm.
Same
Hmm.
thing with the wine on those programs. The same thing with everything on those programs, mind you. They're not gonna spend money on decor. They're not gonna spend money um, on what the plate really
Hmm.
looks like. They want to get the food out of the kitchen, and they want to satisfy people as
Hmm.
quickly as they can. That's
Hmm.
that's that's their idea. When you're going on a higher end program, obviously the expectation level is that much more,
Hmm.
and they're expecting. Listen, the whole kosher game in terms of food has changed dramatically in the last 25 years, call it. Okay, even in Israel.
How
Okay,
so?
well, it's been lifted. It's been lifted to a very high level.
Hmm.
So, when I was a kid going to Israel, okay, the food there was, as basic could be. It was schnitzel, and the
Hmm.
dessert was watermelon. You know, it's a different level
Yeah.
today. There was no such thing as $150,
Yep.
a person,
Yep.
rest. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, the only expensive restaurant in Israel was Cow on the Roof. Okay, I think that was in the Plaza Hotel or something. I don't even remember. But
Hmm.
they didn't have. Now every sure. Every restaurant, whether or not you're in Israel or you're in New York or LA, or
Yeah.
they're all looking,
Yeah.
at, um, doing the latest and greatest, and they're trying to differentiate themselves, and it's the same thing from the catering end. You
Yeah.
know, Back in the day, when I remember, a basic, well, this is when meat wasn't so expensive, but you went to a wedding and it was prime rib option or chicken. That was like basic. Today, no one's serving even prime rib because it's so expensive. But you
Hmm.
know what I mean. They're
Yeah,
the
look, I think you hit on the nail. We beat this one over our head. You get what you pay for, right?
Yes.
I think the more you pay, which is I think the truth, and I've seen this across the board. I've been to really high end programs. I've been to middle road and more budget friendly programs. You have more of a variety, and you have better. You have a little bit, different types of cuts, right? That are probably better quality. Fine. Let's move on. There's
It's
three
not.
more
It's not just
topics.
cuts. It's not just cuts, Donnie. It's the level of the staff also. Obviously, when you're charging whatever it is, $11,000 a couple or $20,000 a couple, even though clearly, the operators' hotel costs are much more, but they're spending much more
Yeah.
on their labor, on the labor talent, on the amount of labor that they have.
Well,
So,
yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
you're
I mean,
going
we
in,
can get into price and what the we do actually touch upon this last time. Let's focus
yeah,
on the food, but we hit this one on the head here, so that's great. And any questions on this,
hmm
obviously, let us know. Let's move on to the next topic here. I think the next topic, which is one of my favorite topics, because one of the main reasons I go away is actually not for the food; it's for the programming and it's entertainment.
right,
So I always look at the lineups. I always look at who programs are having.
right,
I personally think it's important, right, to know who's going and you're going to have a good time because look, you're there for 9-10 days,
yeah,
and you want to make sure there's enough speakers. There's some concerts, maybe some comedy, some whatever, maybe sports, kids clubs,
hmm
some daily schedule pacing, right? That works for everybody,
right.
right? So
So,
if you were to break down, right, the type, some specific things that guests should look for and ask questions around the programming, if that's of interest to them, how would you how would you break that down for guests,
okay,
right?
so right away you're mixing up two things there. I don't treat speakers as necessarily entertainment. Okay, I treat my speakers as education, enlightening people on, especially with, political, what's going on with Israel. So I don't treat that as entertainment, even though, um,
Most programs, by the way, treat speakers as
could be,
entertainment, by the way, just
could
as a
be,
heads up,
but I don't know if
right?
I
Because
told
they're
you.
entertaining. Look, when people go to speakers, they're spending time out of their day to go enjoy listening to, maybe they're getting educated, to your point.
Yes.
Look, yours are definitely much more educational on the world, on different topics. But there are speakers out there that are talking about relationships. Can be interesting. Or talking about social media, right? I mean, you had a couple
Yeah,
speakers around that, and that's
100%.
it depends on what people are
Listen,
interested in.
we do a wide breadth in terms of speakers. Um, like I said, the cornerstone in our programs in our hotels is we always have two main lead rabbis. Okay,
But don't talk about your program. I want this to be
sure,
about the industry. So talk about what I really want to hear from you because you've been in the longest is not about leisure time. I want to talk Pesach programming entertainment. When a guest
100%.
comes and they're looking for a program or they're trying to find a program for next year, what are some key questions and key insights for them to understand that hey, this is a program I maybe want to go on because it has X, Y,
Right,
Z, right? Talk about
right.
like from that
Look,
perspective.
Donnie, again, and I'm not here to promote my. What is that? Yeah, I'm not here to promote my
I know
program,
you're not. I know you're not.
but I list everything on our website. Okay, so well, certainly my entertainment is always listed on my website, and then depending as we get our speakers, because it happens, starting in October, and we keep on hiring people. So I keep on updating our website with our speakers. Um, and I would imagine, and again, I'm not on everybody else's website, but I would imagine that the same thing is done. I mean, you
When
know,
is entertainment and speakers typically locked in? If Pesach is in, let's say, April, let's just
right?
call it April 1st for argument's sake here. What month do you feel like if entertainment's not locked in by this month, there's a problem. There's a bit of a
Look,
problem.
we start locking in our entertainment and our speakers for that matter right after Pesach, or most of our speakers and entertainment, mind you, come back year in year out, and we're lucky enough that we're able to move them around to our other hotels, so they're not, no one's seeing the same person over and over, but we're locked in probably now with at least, I don't know, three quarters of our
Yeah.
of
So
our.
that's not typical, by the way,
That's
right?
not
Because
typical, no.
yeah, no, most programs out there. typically lock in, all their entertainment probably right after, right by or after Sukkot, I would say, right around there.
I would say even later than that, Donnie. A lot of them will start working on it after Sukkot, and whether or not they finish up in November, December, January, it really doesn't matter. But I mean, they're certainly not waiting for 2 weeks before Pesach. So, you
But
know,
you would argue, right? We've had this conversation before, but you would argue that people these days, and I probably disagree with this, but people these days do not go away for Pesach because of the Omer Adams of the world and the entertainers and the speakers and all that jazz, right? That's
that's correct. I don't believe. Listen, I to me, I have top entertainers and top speakers because I want to make my guests happy that are on the program.
Mhm.
Okay, but I don't feel that anybody is coming to a specific hotel because somebody hired, for a 45-minute act, one of the nights of Cholamite. I don't think anybody's, saying, okay, I'm going to spend my $100,000 taking my family away because of this 45-minute show, or for that matter, the speaker. You know, yes, they are looking 100% to have top speakers and top entertainment. Okay, when they go to a high end program, and they typically and they get it, but like I said, they're not going for that reason. They are
So
going, number one, for the destination, for that hotel that they want to go to, and number two, they want to go to a program that they feel is going to be obviously good and top
I
notch. It's not a
yeah.
question that, oh, I'm gonna have God Elbaz, or whatever.
Listen, I'm going to disagree with you here, Robert. Respectfully, I don't agree with you.
Okay.
Listen, having heard from thousands upon thousands of PESO program travelers every single year, I could tell you, you're absolutely right in one regard. Yeah, they go. The first reason they go look at the location, they go look at the destination, the weather, the hotel. Yeah,
Yep.
100%. That's the number one.
Oh,
But
don't
after
forget,
that,
Donnie, number one is the crowd.
uh,
The
no, it's not the crowd. Number
Okay.
one is actually the hotel and the destination and
Yeah, no, I
location.
agree. I agree.
The second behind that, then you can argue maybe it's the crowd, maybe it's the food, maybe it's entertainers. I can tell
Yep.
you this though, statistically, when we've done surveys, program entertainment is really within the top, 3, 4 reasons why people go away.
I
Look,
hear you.
when you hear God Elbaz, not to say I mean, look, he is a nice entertainer. He's a great entertainer. Omer Adam, great entertainer. Look, you know, if the hotel was a good hotel and not a 5 star, but a good hotel,
Hmm.
and I knew Omer Adam was going, maybe I would go to Omer Adam because it's in Mexico or wherever. It
You going?
depends.
Are you going based on Omar Adam? Or are you going based on price now?
I'm leaving price out of the equation. I'm literally just talking programming entertainment. I'm talking about who's actually attending the program. Like for example, you had a couple years ago, you had this what was his name? The British guy who my parents and I loved, who spoke on issues of Israel. Right? He was
You're talking about the chief rabbi of
no, no,
England.
no, not the rabbi. The political British uh, guy who he spoke very nicely, eloquently. He was the guy that came in and talked about different. He was on TV. He was regularly on
No.
TV.
Are you talking?
Yeah,
It's not British. Are you talking about
maybe he's not
the
British.
Israeli
Yeah,
spokesperson
what was his
for?
name? What was his name?
His name is
Anyways,
he's Israeli. He's the
yeah,
head.
yeah,
He
yeah.
was the
He was.
head.
Anyways, the
Yeah,
point being is
I had him in Italy this year. He
yeah,
was
yeah, he
great,
was great. He was great. You know what I
great,
mean? And
great,
and,
great,
and knowing he was,
100%.
so look, I wouldn't say like I look at this as it's such a plus when you have good people that
Yeah.
oh, this Shabbos I'm gonna be seeing someone that I really
Yes.
enjoy. That's such a big deal, it
Yep.
really is.
I agree.
Because like what else are you gonna do, right? You don't want to be, I mean really, what else you want to have some good entertainers.
Yes. Yes.
All
Yes.
right.
I
Listen, we
definitely
got
understand what you're
20
saying.
minutes. We got 10 minutes here. I want to move to the next topic. We beat this one over there. I want to talk about shul and davening setup. This is another thing, 3 times a day, people go to shul, people go daven. Talk about, there's minyanim options, there's,
Yeah,
Sephardi, Ashkenaz people that go away on these programs all the
right.
time, mechitza standards, nusach, maybe chazan quality. Talk about how much of a big deal having different davening and shul options is for
Okay.
people, and maybe what people should look for and ask when you're looking for like a really good davening experience, right? There's a lot of Karl Box type stuff out there.
Right.
People love, things like that.
Look, um, davening tastes, have dramatically also changed over the years. Um, so, while we used to bring thousands all the time to hotels, now some yes, some no, and it's really a matter of, um, what what your crowd wants. I would say in today's day and age, most people that are going, and I'm only talking obviously about now, Shabbos, Yom Tov, morning davenings, because those are the longest,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah, sure.
So most people don't want a chazan. It's the same way in your shul, Donnie, when they bring in a guest, a guest chazan once in a while. A lot of people are running to the other minyan.
Why
And
why is that? I would just I
they
would
don't.
think if you have a chazan that has a melodic voice, right? I mean, like a Yankee Lemmer, I don't know, someone who's really,
Yeah,
really just good and strong. I would, why not have?
I'm not
Why
saying
not?
I'm not saying
Because
that
it
people
drags
won't.
out, or you saying because it's a little
Yeah,
longer. People want
yeah.
to get and get out.
I'm I'm saying yes. Somebody, once on a yontif, the whole Pesach, yeah, they'll like
Mm.
it. But if you have Yankee Lemmer davening every Shachris, I'm sorry, every Musaf, okay, I can guarantee you that breakaway minion is going to be huge. That's just the way. That's just the way. Call it. The modern Orthodox, or any Orthodox world is now working today. They're not these people. A lot of these people are going to shul. Obviously, if they get just Pesach time 3 times a day, they go to shul. They go to shul 3 times a day.
Mm.
At home. So they're
Mm.
not interested in hearing a chazan schlep at the davening.
Yeah,
Again, it's different strokes for different folks. So yes, you can definitely get people that greatly appreciate it and like it. And I personally, I would always go and 'cause, listen, I always tell people even in my own shul, where you're rushing to.
mm.
Okay, what's the difference if shul is over 15 minutes earlier or later? I never understood it. And I never will. You're rushing to for the kiddush.
Yeah,
To me, I rather I'd rather be inspired in my davening, and it works nicely when you have somebody with a great voice.
yeah. And so talk
Um,
about, there's a lot of, Spartan that go away, these days. And in
yeah,
fact, there's a lot of Spartan that goes, that go away on Ashkenaz programs, and there's Ashkenaz that go away on Spartan,
right.
programs, right? And so, having a Sephardi minion, I think, even though this is a little breakaway minion, because that may or may not be the minority, or maybe, I think it's important, right, to have that
Right.
at
The
certain
Sparty
programs.
Minion, I I always tell everybody, if I have enough people that want a Sparty Minion, I'll put on a Sparty Minion. It's not a big to do, but the Sparty davening is completely different than an Ashkenaz davening. They're
100%.
saying
Yeah,
everything out loud. It's long.
yeah,
Okay, you're not going to get
yeah,
Ashkenaz people that are going to want to sit through a
yeah,
Sparty davening.
yeah,
Um, so sometimes we have enough and sometimes we don't. But
yeah,
the Sephardi people that are going to a relatively Ashkenaz program,
yeah,
they understand what they're getting
yeah,
involved with.
100%. 100%.
Um,
So listen, we got 15. We can spend a little bit more time on this one. This one is probably what everyone's going to want to know. The last piece of this session, and I leave the best for last because I think this is a juicy piece that I think we can talk about for hours. But we'll talk about it for the next 10 minutes. Is managing guests' expectations versus reality. What does that mean? I want to know from you, number one, first off, what are the most common complaints? Let's go funny, let's go not funny, let's go serious, right? I want to hear what are the most common complaints I
Are we
want to
talking
know
about my specific programs? Or are we talking about just in
in
general?
just generally, right? If you want to relate it to some of yours, you can. But generally,
Yeah.
what are some common complaints? Now, the other thing I want to know is how operators handle disputes, whether it be complaint disputes, non-financial and financial. And I want to know what your typical program refund policies are, right? So let's start with the complaints, then we'll move to how you handle those complaints, and then what are some, what are typical refund policies in general, and should people expect refunds back if they don't have a good time? But let's start with complaints. What are some common
Okay.
complaints?
So you're on not I'm not talking about my own, I'm talking about in general.
In general, in general.
You're large listen, people are spending an enormous amount of time in their at their seat in their dining room, in the ballrooms. Okay. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, you know, so the most common complaint that you're going to have is whether or not it's food related, or service related. Those two are your biggest and your most important, mind you, because like I said, when you're doing 3 meals a day, it's a lot of time there. So they want, that better be up to par. So that's your number one complaint. Probably second, I'm going to say,
So this is
I
like
mean,
this is just to be specific here. When you say that, it's more, I don't like the food. There's not enough food. The
it could be a myriad.
service is delayed. I'm not getting my food in time.
Yeah, it could be.
They're taking.
Listen, you're dealing with a lot of different taste buds. Okay, so the food is too salty. The food is too bland. The food,
Mhm,
you could have all different complaints.
mhm,
From a service perspective, yeah. I mean, if you're dealing with a hotel that is going with plated dinners,
mhm.
then the service was very slow tonight. It
Mhm.
took me, you'll hear it took me an hour to get my
Or even
to get my
even buffets, Robert, right? I've
yeah
heard complaints where,
the
the
lines.
lines are too long. They're not putting out enough buffet
Yes,
trays, so that way,
yes, yes,
right, the
yes,
food
yes.
runs out and people are
All of the
taking
above.
too much. Okay. What are
Yeah.
some other types of complaints outside the food and service?
So you can get complaints vis-a-vis day camp for sure, and day camp is runs the gamut now. So
Like
you talk about
what?
infants. Okay.
Examples, like
Let's start with the infants because those are the youngest. So your baby to counselor ratio, okay, is when you're dealing with infants, you're not going on a 1 on 10 count, okay. You got to be talking about a 1 on 2, 3, count. So you have to
so
have a lot.
no, sorry to stop you. That's a great question for a guest to ask,
Hmm.
especially if day camp is a huge priority for them, is the ratio of number of counselors to number of children, right? I've
But
seen
keep
and
in
I've
mind,
heard many complaints over the years of people saying, my kid, was with 20 other kids and there was one or two day camp counselors in there. That's not enough day camp counselors, right? So
right?
that's a
But keep
huge,
in
okay.
mind, if you notice, Donnie, I started with infants. So there's a way different ratio when you're talking about kids under 2,
Yeah.
or 3, and then your 5, 6, 8, 10 year olds. Okay, so obviously you need to have the proper amount of staff, in all age groups, but infants are especially a very very low ratio.
Hmm.
Okay, and as you get older, obviously, your 3 and 4 year olds need more counselors versus
Hmm.
your 9 or 10 year olds.
Yeah.
But yeah, day
So,
camp has changed tremendously. Now we're bringing in, not just regular day camp, but we have sports programs in our
well,
day camps, and
that
we have
that's a huge thing, because one of the things I think needs to change in this industry is, and I've seen this, and it's not even a shot on yours. Like, I think it's very critical. Like when you can dump your kid into a room and there's toys, and then these day camp counselors will entertain them for hours, right?
yeah,
Literally hours. Fine, right? Well, they'll run around the room, but I think there's such a necessity for these kids to get out of the room,
yeah,
right? And to walk around, do things, different activities, different games. I think
yeah,
that's missing a little bit in this industry where these operators sometimes they think, oh yeah, we have day camp houses there, they'll entertain.
right,
But I think the type of entertaining here is so critical. So when I'm a guest
yes,
or when I ask is not only the ratio and not only like how many, what is the kids doing, but what are the kids doing outside the room on a daily
Okay.
basis?
So
Such a critical.
in my hotels, the room themselves is used for the meeting point, used for the meeting point and the drop off. Okay. They're not sitting in a meeting room, playing, board games or whatever the case may be. We're keeping them as active could be. So, also the where that venue is also comes into play. But we're we spend a fortune on our kids programming from the standpoint of the staffing, the entertainment, the activities. We always have a kid show happening in the afternoon, and for that matter, like I said, we have sports programs now, and then we bring in you know Zumba and dance. I
Yeah, no,
mean,
there's a lot. It's so
there's a
critical for
lot.
programs to do that. So I think it's great. So let's move to
Yes.
the next thing. How are operators handling disputes? It's a big thing, right? Because,
Right.
my thing is, you can get most of the complaints happen probably during the Pesach itself.
Hmm.
Obviously there's complaints that happen after Pesach, but there's more actions there than complaints. How do
Right.
you when you're doing a million things as an operator, and operators running around with their like a chicken with a head cut off, right? It's so difficult, right, when you have 800, 500, 1,000 people to handle every single different dispute. How do you handle these disputes, and how do you prioritize each dispute? And if you don't agree with the customer or guest that you're going to handle it, what do you do?
Okay. So at every one of our properties, we have three customer relations people. Okay. Those people are the front of house um, customer go-to person. So in other words, a customer has a complaint. Okay, they're not complaining to their waiter or whatever the case may be, but they're going to go to one of our people, and these people are prominently displayed in our book, where there's a photo and then there's the write-up, and and they're in charge, and they're going to you know attempt to fix as best as humanly possible um, a guest complaint. Whether it's whether it's a room issue, whether or not it's a food issue, whether or not, you name it. That's what these people are there for. And, they're constantly, roaming, I mean, first of all, obviously on check-in day, on the first two check-in days, they're sitting at the hospitality desk. So people, get to meet them. Um, but also, at least again, I'm speaking from my standpoint of view. The guests already know that person because right from the get-go, when they make their reservation, that's who they're speaking to. So they're speaking right away to our head customer relations person, when they're getting the quote from that person, and they're getting, every email goes to that person for that specific hotel. So, we have the follow through from the minute the person calls or emails our office all the way through to the hotel themselves.
Yeah.
And they'll do whatever is humanly possible to solve any problems. Thank God, they're, we don't get a ton of complaints, so, it's not, but listen, they take it, obviously, they take that job, just buff. They take their job very seriously, and that's what they're there for.
Yeah. So last question here, should people expect refunds if they don't, something happened on the program, they didn't like it, maybe it's something specific that happened,
I'm sorry, what'd
should
you say?
they
What was the first thing you said?
should they expect refunds, right? If they let's call, if they didn't like it, maybe something had happened, I don't know. Does it matter if something had happened specifically, then maybe they do deserve a refund, but you
Listen,
know,
every case is every case is different. Okay, what is the complaint? How did we attempt to
let's say
solve it? Was it
let's say that I'm making it up. Let's say they found a steak that was completely raw, and it got, and unfortunately, and this happens in every not say this specific case, but someone
hmm
gets sick. Not say it's from the food. Someone gets sick, whatever, and then they say, oh, it was the food, blah blah blah. May have been the
okay?
food. The
So
point
let's
is they get sick, so they get mad and they get upset. So
So let's do
let's
the
say they come
following. When you
back and they
say,
say, I want a refund.
so one
Would you?
second. When you say they got a steak and it was quote unquote raw. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did they get when I'm sure they didn't eat that steak and they said, okay, I want another one and I want that one much more well done. Did that happen? Did they get that? Did they get that steak? Did the program solve that issue? Or did they not? But just because, Donnie, you got, you know, one item in one evening, okay, wasn't up to your standards, you can't expect an operator to say, here's all your money back. You know, um, it's just that obviously it's not going to happen.
No, no, no.
Uh,
That's why I brought up the case of someone gets sick.
right. All right. So let
It's a
me.
bigger deal. They get sick, it kind of ruins, 3, 4,
Right.
5 days of their program.
Right.
And now they
So let me
have
explain to
to,
you. Let me
yeah.
explain to you about the sick thing. Okay. So number one, obviously there are times that, yeah, a lot of people, certain, not when I say a lot, people get sick on a program. So why, what, when, and where is the question. So I tell people, you know, from my standpoint of view, okay, I have stomach issues every single Passover. Me myself. Okay, why? Okay, my body is not used to consuming a big breakfast, a big lunch, a big dinner, barbecue in the afternoon. You keep on going. Once you take your body in a different vein that it's not used to, you know, you're gonna have stomach issues. Okay, that doesn't mean that there's food poisoning. It doesn't mean that the food was no good. It just means that, yeah, you had stomach issues,
Yeah,
and
I'm
that's
not. I'm not referring to that, Robert. I'm referring to like, let's say there was a clear case of,
food poisoning.
an issue of, this wasn't one person saying
Yeah,
it. Well, maybe one person, God forbid, Chas v'shalom, had gotten sick on a program,
right,
right? And they had attributed it to a piece of food. Everyone,
right,
it was a thing.
right.
This wasn't a big meal, is what I'm saying.
I hear you. Listen, food. Um, food poisoning is obviously a totally separate topic. But you have, Donnie, was it last year? I think it was last year, not this past year, the year before. Okay,
We got
there was a
30
virus.
seconds.
There was a
Yeah.
virus going around. Okay, people
Yeah.
had major issues. Okay, you
Yes,
had a
I remember
high
that.
end program. Um, places that there was lots and lots of people that got sick. Okay, they couldn't leave their room, for days on end. That wasn't a food poisoning issue. That was a
Yeah.
virus that went
Yeah.
around. So again, if you want to tell me that there was a program and it was documented that food poisoning happened on the program, okay, and a lot of people got sick, should that operator be refunding guest money? Okay, I can't answer, for other people. I don't know. Thank God I've never experienced that type of situation. Um, but I will flip this around actually, Donnie. I was running the Villa Roma many years ago. This is 20 plus years ago. Okay, and every year people were getting sick. It wasn't food poisoning, but it was the quote unquote the Villa Roma virus. But it happened to people, every year.
Yeah.
Not a ton,
Yeah.
but there were people that got sick.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to say as far as
Yes.
as far as an operator, handing back refunds.
Okay. Guys, thanks so much for jumping on. This has been a pleasure. Another 45-minute session here. Of course, we go over here, but I hope you enjoyed the conversation here with Robert, getting his Manny and Petty here. Um, you're the one who said it, Robert.
Now you're embarrassing me, Donnie. Okay, you're publicly embarrassing me.
Hey, I wasn't the one who divulged that
I
information at the
had some
beginning.
time to kill, Donnie, because I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time.
All right, so guys, tune in next week. We're gonna do another session 3, with Robert here around operations and business. behind the scenes of actually running a program. So what does that mean? We're going to talk about operator economics and margins. We're going to talk about staffing a program properly, hotel negotiations and venue selection. We're going to talk about insurance, cancellations, and force majeure. That's been an issue in the past. How programs differentiate themselves. It'll be a very interesting topic next time. Next week, tune in. We will promote this so you guys know exactly when. Robert, always a pleasure catching up. And I hope everybody
Same here,
this was
Donnie.
helpful for everybody. Thanks so much.
All the best.
Talk soon.
Take it
All the
easy.
best. Take care.